Last year I rode 69 roller coasters for the first time, and today I thought I'd have a chat about some of the standout roller coasters from a really good 2024 season. And there are 11 roller coasters I'd like to talk about today that I thought really stood out, ranging from brand spanking new roller coasters to classics from the past that I was only experiencing for the first time. And before we get started, you might have noticed things have changed a little bit around here. New name, new branding, and things might be a little bit odd for the next couple of weeks. So if you could help me out by liking the video and subscribing to the channel, that would be awesome. Anyway, rather than ranking these, I'm just going to do them in the order I rode them, beginning in April with a trip to Portaventura World in Spain, where I rode Uncharted El Enigma de Penitence for the first time. This is the park's newest roller coaster. It opened in September of 2023, and it's an Intamin indoor family coaster. It's multi-dimensional and it's kind of twinned up with some dark ride elements from Sally Dark Rides as well. This is of course based around the Uncharted franchise, the film series and the game series, and there is some interesting theming in the queue line, including a sort of Tom Holland animatronic that's not quite Tom Holland. It's kind of half based on the movie, half based on the game, I think. And I'm not familiar with the game series or the movies myself, and with everything being in Spanish, I didn't really follow the storyline. But it's fairly straightforward to understand that it is a kind of adventurous Indiana Jones type setting. Now, the coaster system itself from Intamin I thought was fantastic. It's multi-dimensional, so you kind of take things at all kinds of weird angles. There's various launches, there's spikes in there, and all kinds of things going on. It's a really good, forceful but not too forceful family thrill model, suitable for riders of most ages. So I think fantastic work from Intamin. The coaster is let down slightly by the dark ride elements, and I don't think this is necessarily the fault of Sally Dark Rides. I think this is more a case of a lack of investment in the ride itself. There are a few screens which have kind of mixed impact on the ride experience, and a couple of animatronics here and there as well, but most of the ride is taken in the dark, which I don't mind personally. I love a coaster in the dark, and that's why this really makes this list, along with I think it being a really good fit for Portaventura, who were missing a ride suiting that kind of market, and I think it fits in nicely to Portaventura World. And of course then into May there was a fairly minor roller coaster that opened in the UK. You might have heard of it. It was Hyperia. Thorpe Park's Golden Goddess, I think, impressed so many people when it opened, and then depressed a lot of people when it closed the following day. It was not the most successful launch, but we can take nothing away from the coaster hardware itself, and Mack have delivered an absolute worldie there. It's their tallest ever roller coaster, 236 feet tall. It's the tallest roller coaster here in the UK now too, and it delivers so many really cool forces, from the amazing twisted drop to the Immelman, which seemed to just ride better as the season got on. The outer bank thing, which is just, I think, one of the coolest elements we have here on any roller coaster in Europe, let alone the UK. It's a great roller coaster package, let down a little bit by the presentation and a rather pointless splashdown, but otherwise the UK's got a new #1 roller coaster. It kind of catches us up with the rest of the world as well. We've been crying out for a modern roller coaster with modern elements for such a long time. We finally got it. And later in May, I hopped across the Irish Sea to Emerald Park, where they opened Tir na Nog, a whole brand new themed land, which had 2 new roller coasters in it, also a wave swinger. One coaster in particular really stood out, and that's Nafiana Force. This is a Vekoma suspended thrill coaster. It's only the second of them to be built, in fact. This really surprised me. It's smooth, it's forceful, it's whippy. It's got a really creative layout with lots of cool elements. I really enjoyed this. I think the standout for me is the drop itself, which really drags you over, particularly if you're sat at the back. And the second inversion, which is a really sort of dreamy, floaty, downwards barrel roll, which is taken really gracefully. There's whip towards the back end of the ride. It's smooth and comfortable. Vekoma have delivered a really good roller coaster here, and I want to see them build a load more of these suspended thrill coasters, because I think they fit a really interesting gap in the market for parks that can't necessarily afford a big B&M inverted coaster, but still want something that's thrilling, smooth. And this can be ridden by riders of only 1.2 meters in height as well, so it appeals to quite a wide demographic. The theming also really nice, and it's important to stress that Tir na Nog was not complete when I visited as well, so there's still a bit of work that needed to be done, but even still, the castle theming, the way it interacts with the quest as well. Really good roller coaster. Tir na nog as a whole I think is a fantastic investment for Emerald Park, and I think with flights to Dublin not being too expensive, it's well worth a visit over there to go and check it out. And shortly after my visit to Ireland, I headed up to Denmark and visited some parks there for the first time since I went to Legoland as a tiny child. First up on my trip was Farup Summerland, and they have a wonderful Vekoma roller coaster called Phoenix. I imagine you may have heard of this one because it is quite a recent addition, but this really impressed me. In fact, I think this may be the best Vekoma roller coaster I've ridden. I would certainly put it up there with the likes of Fly and Nafina Force, which I just spoke about. I unfortunately haven't ridden Let Coaster yet, which I think may be the other Vekoma coaster that really challenges it. But this is an awesome, fairly traditional sit-down roller coaster. And of course, being a modern Vekoma, it's smooth, it rides really cleanly, you've got the vest restraints as well, so it's comfortable. You begin with a really good first drop, very forceful, drags you over the hill. You then head into this stall loop, which is awesome. It's like a vertical loop with just an extended exit out of it, which just hangs you upside down for what feels like an age. The vest restraints do restrict you slightly there. I think if you had just had a lap bar like the Intamins and the Max do, that would have felt even more spectacular, but even still, a great element. You then head into probably the best element of the ride, which was this awesome, very quickly taken barrel roll. There's lots of floaty airtime, and this is not a ride that's packed with positive forces, but everything that's there is really well considered and hits cleanly wherever you're sat on the train. You then have what's probably the most visually spectacular inversion, which is the barrel roll through the station. And this is so cool to watch off-ride, and it's great to experience on-ride too. And this is just a great all-rounder. It feels classic in many ways in that it is a traditional sit-down coaster with a lift hill. There are no launches or any other kind of madness there. It's just really well put together, taken very smoothly. I really enjoyed Phoenix. And whilst in Denmark, of course, I had to go and visit Djurs Summerland as well. And they've got this awesome Intamin Megalight called Piraten. This is right at the front of the park in their pirate theme section. Who knew? And this is just an airtime machine. This is just pure, unbridled, unashamed airtime from start to finish. And despite its relatively short height, this packs in some really good pacing. You scale your first drop and head down into quite a forceful helix, and then you're just straight up into the airtime hill. You've got an S-bend, a Stengel, and a bunch of traditional bunny hops in there as well, all taken with nice speed, lots of ejector airtime. This is a simple one. It is just pure airtime. There's not much else to say, except that it does it all really well because it's an Intamin airtime machine. What more do you want? I know we're going to skip the summer because I don't tend to travel in the summer because it's expensive and the parks are rammed. And in September, I began my Germany theme park series, which started at Heide Park. And there's actually two coasters from this park that feature on this list. First up, Colossus Kampf der Giganten, which is an Intamin prefabricated wooden coaster. One of only 4 of these models in the world. Had some really extensive retrack and retheming work only a few years ago. And this is a spectacular roller coaster to view with the huge giant's head coming out of the ground, spewing fire as the train approaches. And this does have certain marks of Wicker Man to it. You can tell that Merlin were quite happy when they came up with that concept and thought, let's reuse it on one of our other wooden roller coasters. But this does so many things well. It doesn't have the pure rage and force of El Toro over at Six Flags Great Adventure, but what it does have is some really cool floaty airtime. It's still relatively smooth, as you'd expect from a prefabricated wooden coaster. The first drop's good, it holds its pace pretty well, up until a helix about 3/4 of the way through, where things do start to slow down a little bit. But on the whole, this is a really well presented wooden roller coaster. It rides well, and I'm so pleased that Merlin and Hyde Park invested the money into getting this back open again after it was closed for quite a long period of time. So yeah, definitely well worth going to check out Colossus. However, that's not the only coaster at the park that stood out to me, because they've also got a really good B&M wing coaster called Flug der Dämonen. And this is a really well themed roller coaster. It's quite compact in quite a small space, but you're set in this kind of Transylvanian landscape, weaving around these buildings and rockwork and all kinds of things. And this has got some quite interesting elements. What I will say is, when I rode it first on the left-hand side, I thought, that's quite a good wing coaster, but nothing to write home about. We went back about an hour later and rode it on the right hand side, and it was an entirely different experience. So much more forceful. You got the wing overdrop instead of going underneath. It felt like almost every inversion was more tailored for sitting on the right hand side. It felt like you did tend to go over the track rather than under a lot more frequently on that side. And it was a really awesome experience. So combined with theming, a really good airtime hill, kind of Phoenix-esque at the beginning. The fact that it's compact does mean that the pacing is affected. Every time you build up a head of steam, you're kind of turning back on yourself again. But even still, I thought this was a really good wing coaster. Not quite Phoenix level, but definitely up there as one of Europe's best wing coasters. Then I headed across to Hansa Park for one of the craziest roller coasters on this list. Schwerdeskanen is something else. This is a Gerstlauer Infinity coaster, a model that traditionally I'm not blown away by. I wouldn't say I'm a big fan of the Smiler. I think Fury is a good launch coaster over at Bobbejaanland Land, but again, nothing that I would consider to be spectacular. However, Kanan is. This has a 200-foot tall vertical lift hill enclosed inside a massive tower. There are some spoilers coming ahead, so duck out now if you don't want to hear what happens inside the tower, because it's bloody mad. You ascend the lift hill, a sort of king appears on a projection screen directly above you and waffles something at you, and then you stop, and then you drop directly backwards as if the chain has snapped. If you're not aware this is going to happen, I imagine this is pretty terrifying. And even if you are, it's still a mad, mad, mad experience. However, what happens then is you kind of sit for a little bit too long, sat on your back in that vertical position before the chain resets and you get lifted back up. You then have a vertical drop that then twists out at the bottom really forcefully into a series of mad sort of non-inverting but look like inversion type elements. And then the second half of the ride is all low to the ground, and it just feels like the pacing just picks up all the time. It just, some of the elements towards the end there feel like they're taken almost a bit too quickly. You hit the brake run, you think it's all over, you head back into the building, and oh, surprise barrel roll. Kanan is just a mad roller coaster, and that's not even taking into consideration some of the theming. The queue line is really impressive as you go into the museum. There's a really inventive system for selecting which row you're going to sit on. It's a really thematic and dramatic experience, punctuated by a roller coaster that is just bloody bonkers. Hansa Park is absolutely worth visiting because it's a beautiful park, but this is the coaster that you go for. So we chatted about Hyperia earlier, and you may have noticed Mack did open another fairly meaty roller coaster last year, Voltron and Hyperia at Europa Park. This might just be the best new roller coaster of 2024. It's Mack's first ever striker roller coaster. It combines launches with crazy elements. It's all themed around the work of Nikola Tesla, so it's a whole kind of electric theme. In fact, you begin with this crazy pre-launch sequence where you bounce up and down on the track, electricity buzzing all around you, and then you launch out into a crazy beyond vertical launch into an inversion type thing. What were they thinking? But it's awesome. This is one of the most difficult roller coasters to remember element by element because there's so many crazy things going on. You lose track of where you are. But some of the highlights include a really forceful airtime hill and a wave turn, which really stood out for me as well. You obviously have the reverse launch up the spike before you go into the second half of the ride too. There's just so many crazy inversions in there. You're getting launched out of your seat over and over again, then getting pinned back into it. It is an absolutely crazy experience. It's superbly themed. The queue line's fantastic. You've got the huge animatronic of Nikola Tesla stood there. You can watch the animation of the train coming back into the station. Then you can watch the launch sequence up above you as well. Europa Park smashed it. Mack smashed it. Voltron is an absolute worldie. And if you haven't been to Europa Park, you should go and ride it. And I'm going to go back to Europa Park next week to ride it because I ballsed up my vlog when I went last time. So there will be a Europa Park vlog on this channel, I promise you. And the next coaster I want to chat about is an absolute Intamin classic that has taken me far too long to ride. And that's Expedition G-Force over at Holiday Park. And this is a mega coaster, again, all about the airtime. It has that legendary twisted drop, which is so mad at the back. The airtime hills are all pretty clean. You can tell this is an older roller coaster. You know, there are parts of it where it does feel its age, but it still rides really well. It's mostly smooth. There are some awesome head choppers as well towards the back end of the ride. You get ejector over some hills, floater over others, but if you're into your straight up and down camelbacks, this is a coaster that you will fall in love with. It was great to finally ride this, and it doesn't surprise me at all that this has won so many awards because it really does deliver so much glorious airtime, and that's what us enthusiasts love, isn't it? The final coaster I wanted to talk about today really surprised me because it's literally a mine train. Colorado Adventure at Phantasialand. I was at Phantasialand with Joe from Theme Park Insanity, and this coaster shocked both of us with how absolutely bonkers it is for what is supposedly a mild family roller coaster. Our first ride was actually in the dark, which made it even more surprising because you couldn't really see a lot of what was coming. You get absolutely yeeted out of your seat over those hills. You're getting thrown all over the place around the helices and the turns. Just a fairly standard buzz bar as well, so you're not held in by a lot. And it's just an absolutely crazy ride experience. It caught me by such surprise. I went in there expecting runaway mine train and got a literal runaway mine train. So do not sleep on Colorado Adventure if you go to Phantasialand. This is a park that people visit with Fly and Taron and Black Mamba on their minds. But Colorado Adventure is right up there with all of them. Honestly, it is such a good mine train. Thank you for watching. We've got a whole bunch of vlogs from these trips up on the screen now if you'd like to watch those. And I shall catch you soon here on Coaster Wave. Cheers.